Hello everyone, Prosperity here. With Legion just around the corner, I wanted to get a few guides out to help everyone get a little more familiar with some of the class changes coming in the expansion. This series will guide your way through the skills you'll be using, and this video will be reviewing some of the more intricate aspects of your spellbook. Welcome to the intermediate guide to the Protection Paladin in Legion. In today's video, I'll be going over the passive abilities and cooldowns for protection. If you haven't watched my beginner's guide to the Protection Paladin, take a moment to pause this video and go watch it, as there's some good information that you'll need from there to make better sense of what I'll be showing you here. I'll link it on screen and in the description below. Now that we're on the same page, let's get started. I'm going to break this up into two parts, one for passives and one for cooldowns. If you're confused as to what I'm talking about when I say cooldowns, they're basically just super powerful abilities that typically can be used no more than once every 2 minutes or longer. Your passives are Grand Crusader, Heart of the Crusader, and your mastery, Divine Bulwark. Your cooldowns are Ardent Defender, Avenging Wrath, Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Protection, Blessing of Sacrifice, Divine Shield, Guardian of Ancient Kings, and Lay on Hands. First, let's go over the passive abilities as shown on screen here. Your passives boost the effectiveness of some of your active abilities, even drawing direct influences on how you use them, so learning these is a great first step to mastering the gameplay. Grand Crusader causes you to have a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on Avenger Shield immediately when you avoid a melee attack or use Hammer of the Righteous. As I talked about in the Beginner's Guide to Protection Paladin, having your Avenger Shield up to interrupt enemy spellcast is one of the most important utilities that the Prot Pally can bring to any encounter. There are ways to increase the rate at which you gain procs of Avenger Shield, but I'll be going over those in the next video. Heart of the Crusader is fairly straightforward, increasing your mounted speed by 20%, which actually works with your Divine Steed ability since you're technically mounting for the duration of that spell. Your mastery, Divine Bulwark, is mostly used to increase the damage dealt and the damage reduction effect from your Shield of the Righteous ability, but it also boosts your block chance against melee attacks and your attack power. Baseline with no gear equipped, the block and attack power increases 8%. Your Shield of the Righteous bonus will always equal half of the block and attack power percentage. Gaining mastery through your gear increases this effect immensely, with your block chance and attack power always matching the percent of your mastery. Now we can get into the cooldowns, as you can see on screen. There are a whopping 8 cooldowns, baseline, for the Protection Paladin to sift through, all of which are just about as equally important to you as the last. Ardent Defender is one of your main defensive cooldowns. When activated, it decreases all damage you take by 20% for 8 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. It also has the added effect of bringing you back up to 12% of your maximum health if you take damage that would have killed you while the buff is active. This cooldown is powerful in the right circumstances and should be reserved for if your health starts dipping below 30%. Avenging Wrath can be used offensively or defensively depending on what's needed for the fight. When activated, all damage and healing dealt by you is increased by 35% for 20 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. This spell is particularly useful in situations where you have a defensive buff on and can heal yourself up while your healers tend to other members of the raid. If there's a fight that doesn't require a lot of healing, you can also use this ability on cooldown to increase your raid's damage. Blessing of Freedom is more of a utility cooldown in that it doesn't directly give you a boon, but when activated, makes you immune to movement and parrying effects for 8 seconds on a 25-second cooldown. This spell can be used on party or raid members, however, you should try to save it for yourself on fights where you're the only person being immobilized. Blessing of Sacrifice is a tricky spell to get used to. You can only cast the spell on a party or raid member, and when activated it transfers 30% of the damage taken by the target to you for 12 seconds or until the transferred damage would bring you below 20% health. This ability is on a 2.5-minute cooldown and should only be used when you have one of your larger damage mitigation cooldowns ready to use. Guardian of Ancient Kings is one of the most powerful defensive cooldowns by far, reducing all damage you take by 50% for 8 seconds on a 5-minute cooldown. Since this spell is on such a lengthy cooldown, you'll probably only get 1 or 2 uses out of it per encounter, meaning it should be saved for a really hard-hitting ability that you know you cannot avoid. The last 3 cooldowns have their own subcategory, as they all incur a debuff called Forbearance. This debuff lasts for 30 seconds, causing any player affected by it to not be able to have a Forbearance incurring spell cast on them until the debuff falls off. These 3 spells, Blessing of Protection, Divine Shield, and Lay on Hands, are your absolute last resort abilities in most cases. Blessing of Protection blocks all physical attacks against you or your target for 10 seconds on a 5-minute cooldown. It should be noted that this does not block spell damage, making it ineffective against enemies with mostly magical attacks. Second note here, having Blessing of Protection on you no longer inhibits your ability to attack. Divine Shield protects you from all damage and spells for 8 seconds on a 5-minute cooldown. This ability used to reduce the damage you deal by 50% for the duration, but in Legion this is no longer the case. Lay on Hands is the same as it has always been. On a 10-minute cooldown, this ability heals you or a friendly target for your entire maximum health pool. This ability should not be used lightly, as you will only ever get one use out of it per encounter as a Protection Paladin. In conclusion, the passives and cooldowns you have will change how you play dramatically, but there isn't a way for me to teach you what the best situations for every spell will be. The best way to learn is by honing your situational awareness and figuring out what works best for you. Hopefully I've given you enough knowledge here to look at what cooldowns you're using and when you're using them so that you can start to get the most out of your spellbook. That's all I have for this intermediate guide to the Protection Paladin. The next guide for Prot in this series will be over the changes to talents in Legion. Subscribe to keep an eye out for that and more on World of Warcraft, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask me in the comments below or on Twitter at TheLoranzis. Thanks for watching, and as always, have fun.